But I think it's about time now teachers realise just how good they have it and get back to work.
I feel like as someone that left full-time teaching and now does it part-time as supply, I probably have a little bit of insight to give on this from both sides. Buckle up, because this could be a long one. So, it's fair to say that yes, when you look at averages, teachers actually do quite well. Averages are really difficult to work with because they're skewed by what job you're doing and location in the UK. Here are the minimums that he was talking about, and they're decent. And here are the maximums. You get to the maximums by going through M1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, but you can jump sometimes. Much like if you moved any job, you could negotiate up if you needed to. When I switched between someone that was out of London to Fringe, I actually negotiated up to M4 because M4 of Fringe was less than M3 of Outer, which I'd have naturally been going on to. After that, there's upper pay scale, which you have to apply to get through. And on top of this, you can accumulate extra TLRs, teaching and learning responsibilities. So when I took on a Key Stage 3 role, I was getting like an extra £4,000. Don't even talk to me about the head of year role, which was not as funded as well as it should have been. We had discussions at the time, but it's fine. I went from something like 25k in my first year through to, with 2 TLRs, 48k by the time I left. And that took 7 years of progression. For context, I am in the southeast, not so far from London, and therefore there is a skew up on wages in general. What I'd like to look at next is the percentiles of, if you're in a particular percentile, how much you're earning. So according to this graph, so you've got the percentage on that side and the earnings on this side. So if I was on my 48k, then I would have been just coming up for the 80th percentile in the UK. There were roughly 20% of people in the UK population that earned more than me, and just under 80% that were earning less. And this is where I don't disagree with his statement that sometimes we don't realise how good we've got it in terms of our wages. However, I've raised this point with people that are within the teaching industry and are actively striking, having those conversations. There's a couple of things that have come up which are interesting to debate and think about. So one is that this whole teacher strike is not purely about wages. I think it's getting bundled in with wages, but actually my understanding is that some people are doing it because they believe that schools need more funding. So whilst you could say that teachers are doing well with wages, your teachers are getting screwed over, and so are your children, by being put in classes that are getting bigger and bigger and bigger because schools are being underfunded. That recent announcement, was it a 5% increase? Oh, it sounded great as a headline, 5% increase offer for teachers, but clear word that went with that, whether it was wages or otherwise, was unfunded. Schools get their money through government funding. Unless you're a private school, but any other academy, school, state school, whatever, that's how they get their money. If you don't fund it, where is the money coming from to pay teachers to keep up with inflation or to pay for anything else? It's coming straight out of the resources that you have available for pupils. And if you can't compete wage-wise to make it viable, then you're going to lose good teachers for that. So you then prioritise the teachers, but then you lose all the other resources. Or you start packing classes in to take on more pupils because you get more funding per pupil, and then you've suddenly got classes of 40 if you're not careful. So this is problematic. Let's then talk about not just those conditions, but other conditions that go with this. When you're in teaching, you always get the jibe of like, oh, you turn up at 9 and leave at 3. I didn't. I used to get in at 7:30, if not slightly earlier. And that was predominantly because I had a meeting nearly every day, and there was some sort of briefing, some sort of team meeting, some sort of head of year, whatever it was. And whilst my school was a secondary school, which is odd, finished at 3, I didn't often get out. I was quicker getting out because I got in at 7:15, but wasn't gone by 4. And that was if there wasn't a meeting after school, or if I wasn't there late marking or planning. Dependent on your school, dependent on your subject, dependent on your department, sometimes some of that is better and sometimes some of that is worse. All depends on the school's priorities and systems. We have big knock-on effects as well, that school is apparently meant to be and do everything nowadays. It's also not allowed to do everything. We're dealing with children, whether that's little children or the teenage children. We're dealing with parents all the time. Again, we've taken on more pupils to get enough funding, and now there's more parents to deal with, but not enough staff to do that because there's no funding. Let's talk about the 13 weeks off a year. This is really interesting, technically speaking, because as far as the contracts I've ever seen for teaching are that my wage is sort of prorated. I've only ever been employed on a contract, I'm sure, because I read them, is that I'm employed for 190 days of the year, plus 5 days for training, hence your teacher training days that we have. So whilst we do get our payments spread out in 12, and they are decent payments, we're only employed for 3/4 of the year, which tells you that teachers technically are worth more because we're only getting 75% of a wage because we're only employed for 190 days. 9 times 5 is 195, hence the 5 teacher training days. So technically we do value teachers more, but we only pay them for their day rate. And so therefore they're entitled to the other 13 weeks off a year. And that's why it's a mick take when someone says, and fully well knows, that we work in our holidays, because we aren't paid to do that. My contract says 190 days, 195 days, but there'll also be some little clause in many of these contracts that says you must do the duty of your job and fulfill it. So therefore, if you have to work into the evening, you have to work into the evening. If you have to work into your holidays, you have to work into your holiday. This is not something we get to negotiate. That's just how it is. And if the work isn't done, the work isn't done. It's not there. Your kids aren't going to get taught lessons. We're not going to be ready. In some capacity, you could argue, well, teachers could work for some of those 13 weeks of the rest of the year because then they could top their wage up. But then if they're having to, because they have to do their job, do schoolwork in the holidays, and they don't actually have opportunity to top that up. And you would then be furious that they were earning more because they'd be up in the percentiles more. But in theory, we do sort of, to some degree, value teachers, but we're also mugging them off as well. It's a tale of two halves to me. I think schools need more money to make conditions better, not just for teachers, but for children. And I haven't even got on to Ofsted. The threat of Ofsted breathing around your neck. I only ever did one official Ofsted in my time. They visited my lesson last period of the day. The only maths lesson they visited. And I wasn't fussed. I was going to teach as good as I could. And that was it. I'm not an adapt. Let's not adapt the situation. I'm going to give my best demonstration, but I'm not going to change the lesson at all. It's planned is planned. And luckily I was in a school that we care about the results, but it was holistic in how we treated the children. It was predominantly about the pupil as a whole. We didn't just look at pupils and look at them as grades alone. We looked at them as humans, which some schools don't have the opportunity to do because the threat of Ofsted is breathing down their neck. That's breathing down SLT's neck, and that is then being breathed down the neck of every employee, every teacher there. And that's what then causes sometimes in certain schools some pressure to have everything written out. Now, if a school goes into special measures or drops down from outstanding and starts dropping, people are freaking out. Lesson plans left and right, let's document everything, let's get someone to do this, let's overhaul that. And to my understanding, it can be pretty stressful. And obviously the result of an Ofsted is about all, to some degree, that some parents will sort of take note of. Yes, there's community groups, I'm very aware of how they work as well, and the influence they have sometimes. But schools are literally everything. Schools are one of the agencies that's meant to catch stuff if stuff is happening to a child. That is what we try and be a part of there. In particular, secondary schools, we're trying to teach young adults to become adults. As well as that, we work with the other agencies that are looking after children, but we're the ones that see them every day. Sometimes, in some scenarios, we see pupils or around pupils as a school, as an environment, as a community, sometimes more than their parents because of current working conditions. They spend a lot of time with us in school. And it isn't just rocking up and teaching. Behaviour management is one of the biggest parts of teaching. It is a full-on job. You are making decisions for an entire 60 minutes all the time. If you have 30 kids in the classroom, you're making decisions all the time. Every single moment, because you're deciding not only what's going to happen in the lesson, like starter, activity, explanation, which question you're going to ask, who you're going to ask, got to take the register, forgot to take that. You're then dealing with every little decision of the person that turned round, the person that leant over, the person that's called out, the person that's got up out of their seats and shouldn't be out of their seats, the person that's just argued back to me, how am I going to deal with this situation? I speak quickly because that's how my brain has to work when it used to teach all the time, and I still have it now as a supply teacher. Now, I left because I didn't want to work to a timetable anymore. I felt like I could get more freedom, if you can get any more freedom than 13 weeks off a year, by doing things a little bit differently. I do 2 days of supply work now, and I also have some flexible days, so I sometimes do 4 days a week and sometimes just do the 2. I don't hate teaching, and I appreciate that in the whole scheme of the UK, we do quite well on average in general. That doesn't mean that the conditions there... Oh, there was another thing, hang on. One point that someone made to me was, for example, I teach maths. So if you were a maths graduate, which I am not, but many people in my departments that I've worked in are, then you could go out and possibly move into IT as well, or computing, anything like that, if you've got the right skill base. And you could be on a significantly bigger amount of money if you headed into tech. So if you don't match teachers' wages for the graduates coming out that could go and get those jobs, you're going to lose them. But then my point is that you can't get that wage for every subject. So you're going to start giving different subjects different amounts of pay. And I know that's a touchy point. This is ever so complex. I've spoken for 10 minutes. Well done if you're still here and made sense of any of it. I don't know what the answer is, but feel free to let me know some of your thoughts in the comments.